The kiss was still on my mouth when his father stepped out of the trees. 1 second, all I knew was Darius. The heat of him. The rough slide of his hand at the back of my neck. The wild, impossible fact that the man who had spent weeks looking at me like I was both answer and danger had finally kissed me like he could not help himself. The next, the woods around Nana's house went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that made the hair rise on the back of my neck and sent a warning straight through the boundary I had just woken with my blood. I felt the wards before I saw him. They tightened through the ground beneath my boots, roots coiling deep under the yard, stones singing green-white under moonlight. The line I had mended shivered once, alert, angry, and every living thing in the dark seemed to hold its breath. Darius stepped in front of me at once. It should have annoyed me. It did not. Not when his chest was still bare where his shirt had torn in the fight. Not when the wolf's eye scar carved into the left side of him glowed a deep, furious red beneath the moon. Not when every line of his body had gone hard with the kind of readiness that belonged to a man who had spent too long expecting blood at the door. Then a figure separated from the black line of trees and became a man at the edge of the ward. I understood, in one ugly, immediate breath, exactly where Darius got his face. Not the kindness hidden so carefully beneath it. Not the quiet ache, not the restraint. Just the bones. His father was broader through the shoulders than I expected, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to swallow the moonlight instead of reflect it. He had Darius's jaw, Darius's height, even something of the same dark hair gone silver at the temples. But where Darius looked carved by weather and endurance, his father looked sharpened by cruelty. He smiled, and I hated him instantly. Behind us, pack members spilled from the porch and yard in varying states of injury and fury. Gideon moved to Darius's right, with blood on his beard and murder in his eyes. Mara came down the steps with her silver-streaked braid hanging loose and a knife still in her hand. Rafe's lip curled back from lengthening teeth. No one crossed the line. No one needed to. The threat stood just beyond it. His gaze moved first to Darius, then to me. That smile deepened. "So," he said, voice smooth as old poison, "the moon finally answered you." Darius did not move. "Leave." His father laughed softly, like that word amused him. "You stand on borrowed land, behind borrowed magic, and think you can command me?" The boundary pulsed under my skin, almost offended on my behalf. My palm still stung from the blood I had given it in the chamber below the house. The land was awake now. I could feel it listening. "It isn't borrowed," I said before I could think better of it. Every head turned a little. Even Darius's. His father's eyes settled fully on me, pale and cold and interested in a way that made my stomach knot. "And you're the woods girl." "Caliana," I said. He tipped his head. "You should have stayed gone, Caliana." "I could say the same to you." That earned me another smile, thinner this time. He took one step closer. The boundary flashed. Green-white light ran over invisible lines in the yard and struck him at the chest in a burst of sparks. The old alpha did not fly backward the way the other wolves had earlier. He only stopped, letting the ward light crawl over him for one charged second before it snapped away and left the night trembling. The house exhaled around me. The roots held. Good. His gaze lifted again, not to me this time, but to the scar on Darius's chest. "There it is," he said softly. Darius's breath caught. So slight I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking. His father did not miss it. The smile that touched his mouth then was terrible. My eyes dropped instantly to the mark carved into Darius's skin. The wolf's eye shape burned brighter, the lines of it reddening as if someone had poured heat straight beneath the flesh. Darius's hand twitched once at his side. Pain. Real pain. I took a half step toward him without meaning to. He blocked me with the barest shift of his shoulder, not looking back. His father watched the movement and seemed to enjoy it. "You hide behind a keeper's threshold now?" he asked Darius. "That's new." "You don't get to speak to him like he belongs to you," I snapped. His gaze cut back to mine. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Not the wind, not the trees, Then he smiled again, and I understood something worse than anger. He found me entertaining. "Blood says otherwise," he said. My mouth went dry. Darius's voice came low and dangerous. "Enough!" But his father kept talking as if Darius had not spoken at all. "You should ask him," he said to me, "what hope costs." The scar on Darius's chest blazed hotter. I saw it. Mara saw it too. Her sharp eyes narrowed at once. Gideon swore under his breath. Rafe shifted his weight, tense and uncertain now, instead of merely angry. I looked up at Darius. He was staring at his father with such cold hatred it seemed to frost the air between them. "What does that mean?" I asked. Neither man answered me. His father's gaze moved over the yard, the house, the wolves gathered in defensive silence. "Pretty little refuge," he said. "Shame it already proved it can be opened from the inside." The words hit the pack like a fist. After Celine, after the broken wardstone and the breach from within, nobody had any room left for pretending we were safe from our own weaknesses. Rafe swore outright this time. Gideon bared his teeth. Mara's grip tightened on her knife. Darius did not look away from his father. "Name who?" Gideon growled. The old alpha gave a lazy shrug. "If I have to name your cracks for you, perhaps I overestimated what's left of my son." That did it. For the first time, something genuinely ugly crossed his face. The night seemed to darken with it. "Oh," he said, "he has been praying hard." Darius moved then, one violent, instinctive step toward the line, wolf rising hard under his skin. The boundary hummed in warning. His father smiled wider. "Darius," Mara said sharply. I reached out and caught his wrist. He went rigid under my hand. For one terrible second, I thought he would pull from me the way a snared animal yanks from the rope. Instead, he only stood there, every muscle locked, the mark on his chest burning so bright it looked alive. His father noticed that too. Of course he did. "While you build nests in other people's houses," he said, voice carrying through the trees, "your pack bleeds for it." Darius went still in a whole new way. Not from rage, from impact. I felt it like the woods had dropped away beneath us. His father saw that, and I knew he had said exactly what he came to say. He tipped his head once, almost mockingly. "Come home, son, or keep running until there's—" "You don't have a son," I said. "No one left to run with." Then he stepped back into the trees. The darkness swallowed him fast, but not before he gave me one last look. "You should decide quickly, Keeper," he said from the dark. "The next gate may not stay shut." And then he was gone. Not truly gone, I thought. Men like him never really went anywhere. They just changed where the threat was standing. The woods found their voice again all at once. Crickets, leaves, the restless hiss of wind in late branches. But the relief never came with it. The ward still throbbed through my bones. Darius tore his wrist from my hand and barked, "Inside!" The pack moved on command. That was the thing about fear. It made obedience look like common sense. The house smelled like blood, damp wool and wood smoke before the night was half over. Mara took over the kitchen table like she'd been born in war, ordering towels, boiling water, and needle kits with the clipped calm of someone who had survived too much to waste breath on panic. Gideon helped get the worst of the wounded settled. Rafe stalked from window to window with a temper sharp enough to cut himself open on. I carried water, bandages, and clean cloth from the old linen closet Nana had always kept overstuffed. It felt strange and wrong, using her kitchen to patch wolf bites and claw wounds, laying bloodied towels over the table where she used to knead biscuit dough. But nothing about my life had felt normal since I came back to Hocking Hills and found a werewolf pack living in my grandmother's house. Less so since I found out the house had always been more than a house. And less still since I had kissed the man currently pretending not to look at me from across the room. Darius stood at the far counter while Gideon pressed a cloth into a gash along his ribs. The cut wasn't deep. The scar was worse. I could tell even from across the room. The wolf's eye mark on his chest had not faded back to its usual old bruise colour. It still burned faintly red, as if something behind his skin refused to cool. He caught me looking. For one stupid, suspended second, I thought the room might fall away. that maybe whatever had passed between us in the yard before his father appeared was still there, waiting, bruised but alive. Then he looked away first. It was such a small thing. It hurt anyway. Mara followed my gaze and missed absolutely nothing, because of course she didn't. She tied off a bandage around one of the younger wolf's arms and murmured, "If you're going to stare, girl, at least make yourself useful with it." I took that as permission to cross the room. Gideon stepped aside when I reached Darius, whether because he thought I could help or because he knew better than to get between a woman and a question. I couldn't tell. "Let me see," I said quietly. Darius's jaw flexed. "It's fine." "The cut or the scar?" His eyes flicked to mine. Too much passed through them too fast. Warning, exhaustion, something almost desperate. "Caliana," he said, and my name sounded rougher on his mouth than it had a few minutes ago. "Not now." I looked down anyway. The scar had split in one thin place near the lower edge, enough for a dark line of blood to trail over his skin. My fingers lifted on instinct. He caught my wrist before I touched him. His grip was gentle. The refusal was not. "Don't," he said. The word landed between us like a door shutting. I went still. Not because I wanted to, because for one ugly second I could not seem to breathe around the disappointment crowding my ribs. "A minute ago," I said, keeping my voice low because the whole pack did not need to hear me unravel, "you kissed me." Something flashed in his expression. Pain, maybe. His father was not at the gate a minute before that, he said. "So that changes everything?" "It changes enough." The answer was quiet, hard, final in a way that felt practiced. I pulled my wrist from his hand. "What did he mean?" I asked. "About hope, about your scar." His eyes shuttered. "Nothing I want near you." That isn't an answer. It's the only one I'm giving tonight. The words should have made me angry. They did. But there was something in the way he said them, as if each one had to be dragged past broken glass, that kept the anger from settling cleanly. It left something worse in its place. Worry. Gideon cleared his throat and pretended he was suddenly very interested in the bloody rag in his hands. Mara, who was not pretending anything, said from the table, "If we're done snarling at each other, some of us are actually bleeding." Darius stepped back from me at once. "Not far. Far enough." "I'll check the lines," he said to Gideon. "You should sit down before you fall down," Gideon shot back. "I'm fine." That was a lie, so obvious, even Rafe stopped pacing long enough to snort at it. Darius ignored him, shrugged into a clean shirt with visible annoyance when the fabric brushed his chest, and turned to the room instead of me. "Double the watches. No one goes beyond sight of the house. If anyone sees movement at the tree line, you call it. You do not chase it." Rafe folded his arms. "What if it's our mystery friend on the inside coming to open the door?" The room chilled. Darius's gaze slid to him. "Then we find them with proof, not panic." Rafe's mouth tightened. "Your father knew too much." "My father always knows too much," Darius said. That was not reassurance. Rafe clearly thought so too, but Mara cut in before he could speak. "Then stop wasting breath and start posting bodies where they need to be." Gideon pointed at me with the bloodied rag. "And you need sleep." "I'm not tired." That was my lie. Mara gave me a look sharp enough to skin bark. "You renewed an old boundary with your own blood and then fought off a pack attack. You're absolutely tired." My body chose that moment to agree with her. Every muscle in me ached. The cut across my palm throbbed in time with the wards under the earth. The house felt too bright, too loud, too full of hurt. Still, I did not want to leave. Not with Darius looking like a man trying to hold his own ribs shut from the inside. Not with his father's words still hanging in the room like smoke. "I'll be upstairs," I said finally, because pride was the only thing holding me together at that point, and I had no intention of letting Darius watch it fray. He nodded once without looking at me. That, more than anything, nearly undid me. Sleep never came. The house settled around me with unfamiliar sounds. Heavy footsteps downstairs, the low murmur of wolves changing shifts, boards creaking under too many bodies, someone coughing in the hall. Nana's room, which had once held nothing but lavender soap and old quilt batting, now held me wide awake in borrowed nightclothes, with moonlight stripping the floor and the taste of Darius still haunting my mouth. Worse than that, the boundary would not let me drift. Once I had renewed it, it no longer felt separate from me. It hummed through my bones in slow, living pulses. Every time the wind brushed the west trees, I felt it. Every time a rabbit darted near the root line, I felt that too. The land did not sleep simply because I wanted to. Sometime before dawn, the pulse changed. Sharp. Strained. I sat up so fast the blankets tangled around my legs. Something was at the west line. Not striking it. Pressing against it. Pleading. I shoved out of bed, dragged on my jeans and Nana's old green sweater, and went downstairs barefoot enough to be silent. The first floor was mostly dark except for the faint lamp glow in the kitchen. The back door stood open to the porch. Cold air slipped in through the screen. Darius was already there. He stood with both hands braced on the porch railing, staring out toward the black trees. The moon had gone thin and low. Dawn had not yet started in the east. In the half-light, he looked less like a man than a shape the night itself had cut out and left standing guard. He did not turn when I stepped beside him. "You can feel it too," he said. Not a question. Yes. That was all. The silence between us carried too much now. The kiss, his retreat, his father, the things he would not tell me, the things I was tired of pretending did not matter. I opened my mouth. The ward struck hard. A ragged grey shape burst from the trees and hit the boundary with a choked sound that was more pain than growl. I lurched forward. "Wait!" The line flashed bright enough to turn the yard green-white. The wolf staggered back, one front leg collapsing under him. Blood darkened one whole side of his body. Darius was off the porch before I could blink. I followed close, my heart hammering, the wards singing up my spine. The wolf tried to rise again and failed. "Easy," Darius called, and something in his voice changed, something familiar, something that sounded less like command and more like home. "Easy, stay down." The wolf lifted his head at the sound and let out one broken whine. Recognition hit Darius's face. "Thomas!" Gideon came barreling out of the house behind us, Mara and Rafe close after him. "Moon above," Gideon said. "Let him in." The boundary pulled at me, asking. Permission. Belonging. Beneath the copper reek of blood and the damp stink of fear, the wolf carried the pack's scent. Not just Darius's current wolves, older traces too. Pine resin, limestone, coal den earth, something deeper and farther that made the stones beneath my feet stir, as if they knew the shape of it. I put my good hand out toward the line. "Let him through," I whispered. The roots eased. The light thinned. The wolf stumbled across the yard and made it only a few feet before collapsing at Darius's boots. Gideon dropped to his knees beside him. "Thomas, shift, damn you! Shift!" It took effort, too much, but bones finally cracked and bent through the battered shape of the wolf until a bloodied man lay shuddering on the grass, naked except for the blanket Mara threw over him a second later. His face was gaunt. Mud streaked his jaw. One eye was swelling shut. Still, he looked up at Darius like he had crossed half the state for this one moment. "Alpha," he rasped. The word landed hard in the dark. Darius crouched at once. "What happened?" Thomas coughed, blood bright on his lip. Gideon cursed under his breath. "The South Ridge," Thomas said. "He took the South Ridge dens 2 nights ago, burned the storehouses, said hunger would flush out anyone still hiding." Every wolf around me went still. Darius did not speak. Thomas dragged in another breath, fighting for it. "He's pulling families in. Anyone who ever ran with you, anyone who won't swear again, he's taking them back to the main grounds." "How many?" Gideon asked. "Too many." The answer came flat with exhaustion and shame. Mara knelt on Thomas's other side, already checking the wound along his ribs. "Who got out?" "Some. Not enough." His one good eye found Darius again. The ones who left years ago, they're close, hiding in the ravines, the quarry, all the places he never thinks to search twice. They're waiting. Tomas swallowed hard. Still listening to you. Something in Darius's face broke so fast and small, I might have imagined it. Mara didn't. Neither did Gideon. Rafe looked away first. Thomas's fingers clutched weakly at Darius's forearm. He said if anyone still speaks your name, he'll make examples until nobody remembers it. The quiet that followed felt bottomless. Then Darius stood. Not slowly. Not carefully. Like if he did not get to his feet that second, something inside him would split open in front of us all. I moved before I thought. Darius. He took one step back from me. Not enough for anyone else to notice, maybe. Enough for me. The space between us felt colder than the night. Get him inside, he said. Gideon and Rafe lifted Tomas. Mara followed, one hand pressed to the wound at his side as they hurried him toward the house. I stayed where I was. Darius remained in the yard with his back to me, shoulders rigid, head bowed slightly like he was listening to something only he could hear. The scar. I knew it. I did not know how I knew it, only that I did. Whatever lived in that mark was awake and hurting him. Don't do this, I said softly. He laughed once under his breath. There was no humor in it. Do what? Pretend none of this is touching you. He turned then, and the look in his eyes made every answer I thought I wanted catch in my throat. This touches everyone, he said. Then he walked into the house without waiting for me. By the time dawn put a grey edge on the windows, the whole pack was gathered in the kitchen and dining room. Tomas lay passed out on a pallet near the hearth, bandaged and breathing. Gideon stood with his arms crossed near the back door, blood scrubbed from his hands but not from under his nails. Mara leaned against the table with a mug of coffee gone cold. Rafe paced until Darius told him to stop, and then he stopped so abruptly it was almost funny. Almost. No one smiled. Darius stood at the head of the table, one hand braced on the wood Nana had sanded herself years ago after I gouged it helping her can peaches. Seeing him there, big, scarred, exhausted, trying not to show any of it, made something angry and protective knot under my ribs. He looked at all of them, not me. We know two things, he said. He's escalating on the Packlands, and he wanted us to know it. Rafe shoved a hand through his hair. Then we hit him before he hits again. With what? Mara asked flatly. Half our people are injured, and the other half haven't slept. We sit here then? Wait for the next warning at the tree line? No, Gideon said. We do what keeps the most people alive. The words sat there for a beat. Darius's face gave nothing away. Then he turned to Gideon. Fuel the trucks. The room stilled. Mara's eyes sharpened. Rafe straightened. Darius kept going as if he had not just changed the air in the room. Keep only what can be packed in 10 minutes. Medicines first, food second. No fires outside the house. No one leaves the line alone. If the ward flickers once, we move before dawn tomorrow. I stared at him. Maybe I had heard wrong. Maybe the lack of sleep had turned my mind to smoke. Move, I said. His gaze found mine at last. It should not have mattered that it took this for him to really look at me. It did. I'm not letting him pin us here, he said. This is the safest place you've had. Safe and hidden aren't the same. You think running farther will fix this? His jaw tightened. I think keeping my people breathing is my job. The words hit harder than if he'd shouted. Maybe because some part of me understood them. Maybe because another part of me was already beginning to hate them. Your people are bleeding on your Packlands, I said. Thomas just told you wolves are still waiting for you there. The entire room went still again, not because I was wrong, but because I had said it out loud. Darius's expression did not change. That's exactly why I won't drag the rest of them into a trap. A trap. As if home was nothing more than ground set to swallow him. As if my grandmother hadn't handed him sanctuary on purpose. As if the land itself hadn't risen under my blood and chosen to hold for him. as if the answer to every wound his father dealt was to cut farther away from the place it was made. Gideon looked between us and wisely said nothing. Mara, damn her sharp old soul, looked like she understood far too much. Rafe muttered, "At least we'll be ready," but he didn't sound convinced. Darius gave the final orders anyway. No one argued after that. Fear had a way of dressing itself up as strategy. Chairs scraped, boots thudded. Packs were already being mentally counted, routes already being imagined, escape already taking shape in the room before a single bag was lifted. I stood at the table Nana had loved, with the last of Darius's kiss still haunting my mouth and the first pale light of morning crawling over the floorboards, and watched him turn survival into another version of leaving. The boundary had kept his father out. But as the pack began to move around us, gathering what they could carry, I understood something cold and awful. The gate had closed to one enemy. Darius was already looking for another way out. By afternoon, the house smelled like leaving. Canvas bags, gun oil, cold coffee, damp wool drying too close to the stove. Every room had turned into a calculation of what mattered enough to carry and what would have to be abandoned if Darius gave the word before nightfall. He avoided me with the kind of precision that would have been impressive if it hadn't been infuriating. When I came in through the kitchen, he went out through the mudroom. When I crossed the porch with armfuls of blankets, he was already in the yard, barking orders to Gideon and Rafe. When I tried to catch him near the pantry, he handed me a crate of medicine like busy hands could replace answers. On my third attempt, I set the crate down on the table hard enough to rattle the jars inside. "You can't keep doing this." Darius looked up from the map spread over Nana's table. He had changed shirts again, dark fabric buttoned high enough to hide the scar, but not the strain pulling at his face. Doing what? Pretending that kiss didn't happen. Pretending your father didn't say things that clearly meant something. Pretending I'm supposed to just stand here and pack bandages. Something flickered in his eyes. It was gone too fast to name. Caliana. "No, you don't get to say my name like that and then walk away." The room had gone too quiet. Even Rafe, sharpening a blade by the sink, stilled enough to listen. Darius lowered his voice. "If I talk to you the way you want, you stay closer. If you stay closer, he comes harder. I'm not risking that." "He's already coming." His jaw flexed once. "Exactly." Then he folded the map, took it with him, and left me standing there with all the things he still hadn't said. Mara appeared in the doorway a minute later with a bundle of clean shirts over one arm and the unimpressed expression of a woman who had witnessed too many young people make misery out of love. "If you're waiting for him to stop bleeding pride and start speaking plainly," she said, "you may grow old first." "That's encouraging." "It's honest." She jerked her chin toward the floor. "If you want answers, stop asking the man trained not to give them. Ask the women who hid them where he'd never think to look." I stared at her. "The chamber. Your grandmother didn't keep all her secrets in one room." Mara turned away before I could ask more. "Check the cedar chest in the cellar alcove. Bottom board lifts." She was, infuriatingly, right. The cellar smelled of earth and old wood and the faint green pulse of awakened wards. In the alcove beside the hidden chamber entrance sat the cedar chest Nana used to keep winter quilts in. The bottom plank came loose under my fingers with a soft groan, revealing a flat bundle of oilcloth tied in red thread. Inside were maps. Not road maps, not county survey copies. These were older, hand-drawn and layered over in different inks, some so faded I had to tilt them toward the lantern to read them. Ridges, creeks, burial mounds, old stone circles, hunting lines long abandoned. Thin silver marks stitched between them like veins. On the topmost sheet, in Nana's firm, slanted hand, were the words, "Thresholds are not walls, they are hinges." My pulse kicked. I spread the rest across the floorboards. The house in Hocking Hills was marked with a ring of tiny runes. So were 3 other places across the region, one near a quarry east of the old river path, one deep in protected forest, and one farther southwest, on land outlined with a crescent and the faded shape of a wolf's head. I knew that land before I saw the note pinned beneath it. The western wolfland answers the house line, old before the pack, sleeping, not dead. If the rightful alpha stands there by choice, the ground will remember. I read it twice. Then a third time. Darius's packlands weren't just where his father ruled. They were part of the same old network Nana's line had guarded. Sacred threshold ground. A place meant to hold true power, not stolen fear. Another scrap, written in a quicker hand I recognized from my mother's journal, made my throat tighten. Keeper blood may renew the hinge, but only what is freely chosen will hold. My fingers rested on the wolf-marked land. I thought of Darius calling it a trap. I thought of his father standing outside the boundary, like he still owned every shadow. I thought of home twisted into a weapon. Maybe the land itself was waiting for someone to call it back. Voices filtered through the floor above me then, blurred at first, then clearer as I moved to the cellar stairs. Thomas was awake. "Limestone cut," he was saying hoarsely. "Nessa and her cubs made it there. Bran's brother is hiding near the ravine with 4 others, more on the edges. They move at dusk. They still won't cross open ground." A silence. Then Darius. "Who else?" I froze at the sound of his voice, not because he was angry, because he wasn't. He sounded wrecked. Thomas named more wolves, families, old sentries, 2 brothers who had left years ago after one beating too many. Names I didn't know, but Darius clearly did. I could hear it in the way the room went still after each one, as if every name was a hand closing around his throat. Gideon spoke next, low. "They're waiting for a sign." "We're not going in blind," Darius said. No one argued, but no one sounded satisfied either. I stood half-hidden on the stairs with Nana's maps in my hands and understood, with sudden cold certainty, that Darius wasn't only afraid of losing what remained. He was afraid of wanting it back. By evening my anger had curdled into something harder to carry. He did not come near me at supper. He did not ask what I had found. He did not even look at me for long. But twice, when I crossed from one room to another, I caught him already watching the doorway before I entered it, as if he had been listening for my footsteps. That night, I took the moonstone from my bedside table and sat on the edge of the mattress with Nana's notes spread around me. The house had gone quiet in shifts. One floorboard creak, then another, the muted drag of boots changing watch, the low murmur of wolves who didn't sleep deeply anymore. Beneath all of it ran the steady hum of the ward through the earth. And outside my door, a second rhythm. Breathing. I went still. Darius never knocked. He never came in. But when I knelt and pressed the moonstone to the floorboards, the ward carried more than roots and stone this time. It carried him. Not words spoken aloud. Something older, lower. The shape of a prayer pushed so often into silence it had learned how to live there. Moon above, keep her safe. The breath left me. Let her hate me if she lives. Let her go if she must. Just keep her out of his reach. My hand tightened around the stone. Don't let him use me to find her. For one awful second, I could feel the pulse beneath the words, pain radiating from his chest, the scar lit hot as a coal under skin. So that was what he had meant. Not rejection. Protection. The kind that cut both ways. I shut my eyes and rested my forehead against the door, wood cool against my skin, his quiet prayer still moving through it like a heartbeat we were both pretending not to hear. Then shouting split the night. I was out the door before sense caught up. Darius straightened from the wall just as mine flew open, all that hidden ache slammed back behind his face in an instant. In the hall below, Gideon was hauling one of the younger wolves up the steps, blood soaking through his sleeve. Rafe came behind them with another, limping hard and swearing. "Birch Cut!" the injured wolf gasped. "They were waiting at Birch Cut!" Darius was already moving. We all were. Downstairs he cleared the table with one sweep of his arm and snapped, "Map!" Gideon threw it down. Darius jabbed a finger at the charcoal mark near the north line. "We changed the patrol to this route at dawn." Mara looked up sharply from binding the boy's arm. "Who knew?" "Me," Gideon said. "Me," Rafe added. Darius didn't answer. He didn't need to. His hand had gone, almost unconsciously, to the place beneath his shirt where the scar lived. Only 3 people had known the route. The father's wolves had known it too. I looked from the map to Darius's face, to the hard silence settling over the room, and felt the shape of the danger shift again. Either someone under this roof was feeding our steps to the enemy, or the wound carved into Darius's chest was doing it for them. And whichever truth it was, his father was no longer hunting in the dark. He was following us. By sunrise, the trucks were still packed, but no one was talking about leaving. The attack on the patrol changed the shape of everything. Running had been a plan when danger was still circling. Now it had teeth in the yard. Thomas sat wrapped in blankets near the stove, grey-faced but conscious, while Darius stood over Nana's table with Gideon, Mara, Rafe and me gathered around him. The map on the wood was one of Nana's, not theirs. I had brought it down before dawn and flattened it. Beside the house roots, and nobody had questioned me after seeing where the old deer paths crossed the ravines. Thomas pressed 2 fingers shakily to a bend near Birchcut. If they hit this line last night, they'll sweep the limestone shelf next. "Who's there?" Darius asked. "Nessa, her 2 cubs, Bran's brother and his mate." Thomas swallowed hard. "Maybe 5 others. They've been moving between the shelf and the quarry trail." Gideon muttered a curse. Rafe leaned over the table, jaw tight. "If his scouts are already at Birchcut, we have hours, not days." Darius's gaze moved to the route I had marked in charcoal. "This trail?" "It runs under the ridge," I said. "Wet stone kills scent fast. Nana used it to get between the western markers without crossing open ground." Rafe looked at me like he still wasn't convinced a woman raised on herbs and silence should be giving tactical advice in a wolf war. "And you've walked it recently?" "No," I said, "but unlike your patrol route, your father may not know it exists." That shut him up for almost 3 whole seconds. Then Darius made the decision. "Small team," he said. "Me, Gideon, Rafe." "I'm going," I cut in. His eyes lifted to mine, tired, guarded, beautiful enough to annoy me for noticing. "No." "Yes." I kept my hand flat on the map so he could see it wasn't shaking. "I can feel the old lines. If your father's people are laying blood marks in the territory, I'll know before we step into one." "You are not bait. I'm not asking permission because I enjoy your company." Rafe made a sound suspiciously close to a laugh. Mara hid hers in her coffee. Darius stared at me for one hard, silent moment. Then he exhaled through his nose. "You stay between me and Gideon." I was planning on having legs, yes. That earned me the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. It vanished almost instantly, but I saw it. And because life was cruel, seeing it made me miss him more. The woods south of the house were all slick limestone, hemlock shadow, and ravines that cut the earth open like old wounds. We left the truck a mile back and went the rest of the way on foot. Darius in front, me just behind him, Gideon at our rear, Rafe ranging the right flank with his rifle and bad temper. The morning was cold enough to silver the leaves. Darius did not speak unless he had to. "Duck. Step wide there." "Stay close." Each order was clipped and practical, with nothing in it of the man whose silent prayer I had heard through my floorboards the night before. But his hand found my elbow twice over slick stone, and both times he let go too quickly, as if even that brief contact cost him something. I hated that I noticed. I hated more that I understood why. About an hour in, the forest changed. Not in any way the others would have seen at first. The birds still called. Wind still moved the tops of the pines, but the roots beneath my boots had gone tense, and the old threshold line Nana had marked on the map trembled faintly under the earth like a string pulled too tight. I stopped so fast, Darius nearly walked back into me. "What is it?" I crouched and pressed my fingers to the damp ground. The pulse there was wrong, not dead, not broken, forced. "There's something moving through the land," I said. "Not natural, not the wards." Rafe scanned the ridge. "Scouts." I shook my head. "No, this feels—" I struggled for the right word. "Personal." Darius's face changed. I looked up and saw that one of his hands had gone to his chest. The same bruised iron throb I'd felt through the earth was in him too. Not a scent trail, not ordinary tracking. His father was reaching through blood. The realization hit me cold. Before I could say it aloud, a child cried somewhere ahead, thin, frightened, abruptly smothered. Darius was moving before the sound fully died. We found them under a limestone overhang, half hidden by rhododendron and fallen brush. Nessa came out first with a knife in one hand and a little girl tucked behind her leg, her eyes going wide when she recognized Darius. For 1 second, relief nearly knocked her over. "Alpha." The word did something to him I could feel from 3 steps away. He caught her shoulders before she fell, then looked past her into the shelter where another woman crouched with a boy and a baby bundled to her chest. Bran's brother, Eli, I learned a moment later, staggered up from the back wall with a split lip and one arm bound tight to his ribs. "We have to move now," Darius said. "Can everyone walk?" "They can if they have to," Nessa said. That was when the woods went silent. Every bird, every insect, even the wind seemed to stop and listen. I spun toward the tree line. Down! The first shot hit stone where Eli's head had been a heartbeat earlier. Chaos tore loose. Darius shoved Nessa and the children behind the rock shelf and shifted half on instinct, claws punching through his hands as he lunged for the nearest scout. Gideon was a blur of fur and teeth a second later, slamming into the brush on our left. Rafe dropped to one knee and fired twice in fast succession. I reached for the land. It answered so sharply it almost hurt. Roots ripped up through wet leaves beneath one of the attackers, tangling his legs just as Darius hit him. I threw my voice toward the slope, and the brambles there surged wild, thorn vines snapping around another wolf's throat long enough for Rafe to put him down with the butt of his rifle. "Left!" Darius shouted. I turned and saw one of the scouts breaking toward the children. I didn't think. I sang one sharp word Nana had buried in my bones, and the limestone itself sheared loose in a spray of gravel and fern mould, dropping between the scout and the shelter like a slammed door. He snarled and came for me instead. Rafe got there first. He took the hit hard enough to skid in the mud, then drove his blade up under the man's ribs with a savage grunt. The scout collapsed almost on top of him. Rafe shoved the body off and stared at me across the churned leaves, breathing hard. "You dropped the damn hill." "I had help," I said, because the earth under us was still shaking. Another wolf bolted down slope. Gideon brought him down before he made 3 strides. Then, just as quickly as it began, it was over. Not cleanly, not quietly, but over. One scout was dead. Another groaned in the roots I still had pinned around his legs, blood running from a cut at his temple. Darius hauled him upright by the throat before he could shift fully. "Who sent you?" he asked. The scout laughed wetly. "You know who." Darius's eyes went molten. "What is he doing on the Packlands?" For the first time, fear flickered in the other wolf's face. "He's calling the circle." Everything in me stilled. "What circle?" I demanded. The scout looked at me, then back at Darius, and bared bloodied teeth. "Moon Hollow, next full moon, every stray still hiding in your father's territory gets dragged there. Bend the knee or bleed into the stones." Gideon swore. Rafe went still in a way that looked a lot like horror. The scout spat red into the leaves. "Once the circle takes them, they're his, by pack law, by blood. They won't answer you after." Darius's grip tightened. I saw the moment the scar struck him. His whole body jerked. His hand flew to his chest, and blood bloomed through the front of his shirt in a quick, ugly stain. "Darius!" I moved without thinking, reaching for him. He stepped back before I could touch him. Not far, just far enough. The refusal hit harder, because pain was written all over him. Not mistrust, not disgust. Fear. Of himself. Of what that scar might do if I got too close. Rafe looked between us, then at the broken ground around the shelter, at the children huddled behind Nessa, at the scout still trapped in my roots. His mouth tightened. "She heard them before any of us," he said roughly, to no one and everyone, "and she just saved my life." It wasn't an apology. It was better. It was truth. Darius said nothing. He couldn't, maybe. He was too busy holding himself upright against the burn under his skin. Gideon took the prisoner from him and slammed the scout to his knees. "What else?" The man laughed again, weaker now. "Keep hiding. Makes it easier. By the time you come home, there won't be a pack left to call." No one spoke after that. We moved fast, with the rescued families packed tight between us and the woods, suddenly feeling much too small. Darius took point again, blood drying dark on his shirt, every line of him set toward a horizon I could not yet see, but already understood. If we kept running, his father would not just keep hunting us. He would finish stealing Darius's people on Darius's own land, and turn home itself into a cage. By the time we got back to the house, it no longer smelled like leaving. It smelled like wet wool, frightened children, fresh blood, and too many bodies trying not to take up space. Mara turned the kitchen into a triage room before the front door had even stopped swinging. Blankets appeared. Water boiled. Thomas tried to stand and got told, in language sharp enough to skin bark, that if he tore his side open again, she would sew him to the floorboards herself. Nessa's little girl clung to her mother's coat with huge, dark eyes. Her brother, maybe 6, stared at the wolves filling Nana's house with the solemn, exhausted expression of a child too tired to cry. Darius moved through it all, like a man holding the whole place up by force of will alone. He got Eli settled by the hearth. He sent Gideon for extra cots. He checked the windows, the back porch, the line of sight to the trees. He did not once let his hand leave the front of his shirt for long. The blood there had dried dark over the place where the scar had opened. I saw it. I saw him pretending nobody else did. Then Rafe came in behind us, muddy to the knees and breathing hard, and announced to the whole room, "She dropped half the damn ridge on them." Silence met that. Every head turned to me. I would have preferred another ambush. Rafe jerked his chin in my direction, clearly irritated that he was saying any of this at all. If Caliana hadn't felt them first, we'd have lost at least 3 people, maybe more. Gideon grunted his agreement. That landed harder than praise. Not because the pack suddenly trusted me, but because they trusted Rafe not to hand it out lightly. Mara's sharp gaze flicked over me once, taking stock, then shifted to Darius. Something knowing passed across her face before she buried it again in practical annoyance. Nessa's little boy stepped closer to Darius and asked, very quietly, "Are we safe here?" The whole room seemed to hold still around that question. Darius crouched so the child wouldn't have to crane his neck. He was so large he should have looked intimidating. Instead, he looked careful. "For tonight," he said. Not a lie. Not enough. The boy nodded like he understood more than any child should, and went back to his mother. I hated Darius a little for answering that way. I loved him a little for not offering false comfort. That was the worst of it. He kept being exactly the kind of man it hurt to want. An hour later, we gathered around Nana's table again. Not just Darius's inner circle this time. Nessa stood there too, pale and hollow-eyed, one arm wrapped around herself. Eli leaned against the counter with his ribs bound tight. Thomas sat because Mara had plainly threatened murder if he didn't. Rain had started outside, light and cold against the windows. Inside, Darius braced both hands on the table and said, "Tell me everything you know about Moon Hollow." Nessa answered first. "It was where the old rites were held," she said. "Naming nights, winter morning, oaths." Eli's mouth tightened. "Alpha affirmations." That word seemed to settle differently in the room. I looked at Darius. He did not move. Nessa swallowed. "If your father calls a circle there at full moon and forces the strays to kneel, it won't just be fear. The land will take the oath." Gideon muttered a curse. Rafe folded his arms. "And if they refuse?" Eli looked at the floor. "Then he bleeds them into the stones as traitors." The room went very still. I thought of the scout laughing in the roots, by pack law, by blood. Mara's voice cut cleanly through the silence. "How many wolves are still hiding on the western lands?" Thomas named places as he remembered them, ravines, quarry cuts, old den paths. More strays than I'd expected, fewer than there should have been. Every number sounded like loss. When he finished, I reached for the oilcloth bundle I had brought down from my room. "I found these in the cellar," I said. Darius looked up sharply as I spread Nana's maps across the wood. Ink-black creeks, faded ridges, silver threshold lines running between marked sites like old nerves under skin. Rafe leaned closer first. Gideon swore softly under his breath. Mara only nodded, as if this confirmed something she had suspected all along. I put my finger on the house, then on the mark farther west, the one shaped by a crescent and an old wolf's head. "Nana wrote that this land answers the house line," I said, "that it's old, sleeping, not dead." Darius's gaze flicked to the note I laid beside it. "If the rightful alpha stands there by choice, the ground will remember." No one spoke for a beat. Then Darius said flatly, "You want us to march into my father's territory because of a sentence on a piece of paper?" "I want us to stop letting him choose the ground," I said. His eyes met mine. Tired, guarded, burning. "That ground is his." "No," I said, before I could second-guess myself. "It's his now because everyone else has been too afraid to claim what he twisted." Rafe let out a rough breath. "She's not wrong." Darius looked at him. Rafe lifted both hands slightly, irritated already by his own agreement. "You heard the scout. If he gets them to Moon Hollow first, we lose every stray still hiding out there. We stay here. He keeps sweeping the west clean." Gideon frowned at the map. "If these old lines are real, they'd give us cover moving in." "They are real," I said. "I felt one under the ridge today." That brought Darius's attention back to me fast. I didn't mention what I had also felt pulsing through him. I wasn't ready to put that suspicion in the middle of this room, not without proof, not when half the pack was still looking for a traitor, and his chest was bleeding every time his father tightened whatever bond lived in that scar. Mara tapped the note with one weathered finger. "Running has kept us alive. It hasn't made us safer." Darius straightened slowly. "And if this is wrong?" "Then we die on our feet instead of waiting at a kitchen table," Rafe said. That earned him a dark look from Gideon and a quiet, approving one from Tomas. Darius dragged a hand over his face. For one unguarded second he looked every bit as tired as he had sounded in the dark outside my door. "We are not taking everyone blindly into Moon Hollow." "I didn't say Moon Hollow first," I said. "I said the western land. If Nana's right, we wake what's sleeping there before the full moon. If wolves are still listening for you, give them something to hear." His jaw tightened. "Caliana." "Your father is using old law," I said. "Answer him with older law." The rain ticked against the glass. No one breathed too loudly. Finally Darius said, "I'll decide by nightfall." Not yes. Not no. It was the closest thing to hope the room had gotten all day. He disappeared after the meeting. Not far, never far. The house hummed with his presence now, whether I could see him or not. But it still took me 15 minutes to find him in the old equipment shed behind the house, where Nana used to keep seed trays and rusted garden tools. Now it held one lantern, 2 packed duffels, and Darius sitting on an overturned crate, with his shirt unbuttoned and a bloodied strip of cloth in his hands. He looked up when I stepped inside. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "I could say the same to you." "That isn't how this works." I shut the shed door behind me. "It is tonight." For once, he didn't tell me to leave. I crossed the space between us and held out the clean bandages I had stolen from Mara's stack. His gaze dropped to them, then to my face. "You keep ignoring injuries," I said. "I'm beginning to take it personally." The corner of his mouth moved. Barely. "Everything with you feels personal." It came out quieter than he probably meant it to. My pulse stumbled. "Good," I said, because it was either that or admit how much his nearness was already undoing me. He let me step close. That felt like a victory I didn't trust. I peeled the ruined cloth away carefully. The scar beneath was angry and red, the split near the lower curve still seeping in a thin, dark line. It never looked like an old wound anymore. It looked awake. "What is Moon Hollow to you?" I asked softly. His shoulders went rigid under my hands. "For my pack," he said after a long moment. "Everything." I waited. He stared past me, toward the thin crack of rainlight at the edge of the shed door. "It's where our wolves were presented to the moon, where dead were mourned, where alphas—" He read it once. Then again. Rain whispered against the roof. Finally, he folded the paper with a care that felt almost reverent. "If the ground remembers anything of me," he said, "it may not be enough." I looked straight at him. "Then let it remember who you are with witnesses." His gaze held mine for one long, charged second. Not distant now. Not guarded enough. Then he stood. The lantern threw gold over the hard lines of his face, the broad shape of him, the bandage bright against old scars and fresh ones. "When I give the order," he said, voice gone back to alpha steel, "the house wakes fast." My heart kicked. "Darius." He opened the shed door. Cold, rain-scented air rushed in. "We leave at dawn," he said. "Not east. Not away. West. Running looks orderly from a distance. Canvas tied down, engines idling low, children wrapped in borrowed coats, men with rifles scanning tree lines like vigilance alone could hold the world together. But from the inside, running felt like panic forced into lines and straps and whispered instructions. We left Nana's house at first light. No one argued aloud when Darius gave the order. They had done their arguing the night before. Stay, flee, strike, hide, pray. In the end, fear won just enough ground to put us back on the road. Not all the way west, not yet. Just farther. Farther from the boundary. Farther from the place that had held us. Farther from the only protection that had actually worked. It was the choice I had dreaded most. Not standing, not claiming, just moving. Darius rode in the lead truck with Gideon. I rode in the middle with Nessa and her cubs, Tomas half dozing against the window beside us, his face still hollow with pain. Rafe took the back with Eli and two of the younger wolves, rifle across his knees, eyes never still. When he caught me watching him, he jerked his chin toward the trees. "If you feel anything, Woods," he said, "say it before it bites us." No mockery in it this time. "Same to you," I said. One corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile exactly, but it was close. By the second mile, the forest had gone wrong. The road narrowed into old logging track, rutted and slick with yesterday's rain. Pine crowded in thick on either side, tall and black-green, swallowing sound. The children had finally gone quiet, not from calm, but from the kind of fear that teaches stillness. I pressed my fingers to the window glass and felt the land beneath us in broken pulses. Not dead. Pinched. Like something large was pressing on it from both sides. Up front, Darius slowed, then turned us south. 10 minutes later, he turned again. Each change in route brought the same answer. Tension ahead, pressure on the flanks, the forest bending us without seeming to move. I leaned forward between the seats. "Nessa." She looked up. "When we stop, keep the children close. No wandering." She didn't ask why. She just nodded once and tightened her hold on the little girl in her lap. The convoy rounded a bend and braked hard. A pine lay across the road ahead, too large to move quickly, too fresh to have fallen on its own. Its trunk had been cut clean through. Rafe was out of the truck before the engine fully died. So was Darius. The wolves spread fast, weapons up, breaths clouding in the cold. I stepped out and the truth of it hit me all at once. Not chase, pressure, not hunt. My stomach dropped. "He's steering us," I said. Darius turned. Herding. I pointed toward the trees, toward the tightness in the land. Not just following, steering. Every route you choose closes where he wants it to. Rafe scanned the pine walls hemming us in. Into what? A gunshot cracked from somewhere high to our left. The back window of the last truck exploded inward. Everything broke. "Move!" Darius roared. Wolves loyal to his father hit us from both sides of the road. They came low and fast through the pines, half-shifted, armed, and grinning with the mean certainty of men who thought the ground was already theirs. Gideon took the first one down with a shot to the throat. Rafe yanked Eli behind a tire and fired twice into the trees. "Get the kids off the road!" I ran for Nessa as another shot split bark beside my head. The land felt thin here, the roots shallow under the carpet of pine needles, but it still answered when I called. I threw my voice into the earth and the ground rose in a snarl of exposed roots, tangling the legs of a charging wolf long enough for Thomas, bleeding and half-broken Thomas, to put a knife through his neck. Nessa shoved her children toward the ditch, and I caught the little boy before he fell. "Stay down," I told him. Darius was everywhere at once, on the hood of the lead truck, in the trees, all violence and command. His hands had gone half-clawed again, his voice no longer fully human as he barked orders and ripped one attacker off Gideon before the man could tear into his shoulder. For one savage minute, it looked like we might break through. Then the woods fell silent. Not empty. Silent. Every loyal wolf still on their feet felt it, heads lifted, breath caught. Darius stopped dead in the middle of the road. His hand went to his chest. Blood spread through the front of his shirt. And from between the pines ahead, his father walked out smiling. He looked enough like Darius to make my skin crawl. Same height, same broad frame, same dark hair gone rough with age and cruelty. But where Darius held himself like a wall meant to shelter, his father carried power like a hand around a throat. "Well," he said softly, looking over the wrecked road and scattered pack, "there's my son, still running." Darius's face went white with pain. "Leave," Darius said, voice shredded. His father laughed. "How many roads will you bury them on before you admit the truth?" His gaze slid to me. "Ah, there she is." The scar flared again. Darius dropped to one knee with a sound I never wanted to hear from him again. I moved toward him on instinct. His father moved faster. "Caliana!" Gideon shouted. I reached for the land, but the old wolf came through the pines like he had been waiting for that exact second, waiting for Darius to fall, for my attention to split. His claws flashed. Rafe hit me from the side, hard enough to knock the breath from my lungs. The blow meant for me buried itself in him instead. For one terrible heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Rafe staggered. His rifle fell from nerveless fingers. Blood welled dark and fast beneath his hand where Darius's father had driven claws deep under his ribs. "No," I heard myself say. Darius's father smiled at his son over Rafe's shoulder. "Hope costs you more every time." I screamed into the earth. The pines answered. Roots tore up beneath the road in a violent surge, snapping around ankles, bursting through mud and stone. One wrapped the old alpha's wrist hard enough to wrench him back a step. Another slammed into his knees. Gideon and Eli opened fire at once. Darius broke whatever hold the scar had on him with a roar that shook the needles from the branches and launched himself forward. His father twisted free before Darius could reach his throat. Two loyal wolves dragged him back into the trees as the others fell away around him, retreating as quickly as they had come. But he left laughing. He left Rafe dying in the road. I was on my knees beside him before the last of the gunfire stopped. Blood soaked my hands when I pressed them to his side. Too much, too fast. The wound was deep and wrong and already stealing the heat from him. "Stay with me," I said, though I knew. "Rafe, stay." He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't caught on blood. "Well," he rasped, eyes finding mine. "That's unpleasant." My throat closed. Darius dropped to the ground on Rafe's other side. There was blood on his mouth, on his hands, all over the front of his shirt. For the first time since I had known him, he looked shattered. "This is my fault," he said. Rafe's gaze slid to him. For all his pain, it sharpened. "No," he said. Darius bowed over him anyway, like guilt weighed more than bone. Rafe coughed, then grabbed a fistful of Darius's shirt with surprising strength. "She was never the weakness," he said. The road held its breath. Running was. His fingers tightened once. "Take us home, Alpha." Darius made a broken sound low in his throat. Rafe let go. By the time Gideon closed his eyes, the woods had gone quiet again. We made shelter by dusk in an abandoned hunting cabin tucked against a ravine. No one spoke above a murmur. The children slept in a heap near the fire. Mara washed blood out of bandages with a face carved from stone. Gideon and Eli laid Rafe beneath a wool blanket in the next room and closed the door. Darius did not look at anyone for a long time. When he finally came to find me, I was on the back steps with Nana's satchel in my lap and pine sap still sticky on my sleeves. "At first light," he said, voice flat from overuse. "Gideon will take you back to the house." I looked up slowly. "No." His jaw tightened. "My father came through a dozen wolves to get to you." "Yes." "You go back behind the wards. Tonight." "No." The word cracked between us. He stared at me like stubbornness itself had become a personal insult. "Caliana." "No," I said again, rising to my feet. "I am not something you send away so you can feel better about losing people." His whole body went still. "I just watched Rafe die," he said, too quietly. "And I watched him die telling you to stop doing exactly this." My eyes burned, but I didn't look away. "You do not get to turn his last words into another road." Pain crossed his face, raw, unguarded, gone too fast. "I can't lose you too." The truth of it struck hard enough to steal my next breath. Then he turned and walked back inside before I could see whether the silence meant. So I opened Nana's satchel by lantern light and spread the maps across the cabin floor. But I held my ground. Surrender or fear. Maybe both. I couldn't sleep. "Then stop helping your father decide where I stand." Rafe's words kept moving through me. "Take us home." For a long moment, he said nothing. At first, I saw only what I already knew. The threshold lines, the linked markers, the old silver-veined paths between sanctified ground. The house, the western land, the crescent mark for Moon Hollow. Then I noticed blood on the paper. Mine. A smear from where I had split my knuckles in the fight. It crossed the moon circle mark. The ink beneath it shimmered. I went still. Slowly, I pressed my thumb, still tacky with my own blood, against the faded symbol. More silver rose through the page. A second pattern appeared under Nana's map, hidden until now. The moon circle, not as a separate site, but as a hinge point inside the greater threshold network. And in the margin, in Nana's hand, words surfaced where before there had been only blank paper. What is bound by stolen blood on sacred ground must be broken there also. My pulse slammed. Moon Hollow was not just where his father meant to chain the pack. It was where that stolen power rooted deepest into the land. Which meant the truth landed cold and absolute in my bones. We were never going to end this on the road. The only place Darius's father could truly be broken was the place he had stolen. Home. Grief makes every room smaller. By dawn, the cabin felt built of smoke, wet wool, and silence. Rafe lay wrapped in a grey blanket in the front room, his boots set neatly beneath the table as if he might still sit up and demand coffee no one had made right. Nobody had slept much. Nobody had said his name more than necessary, as though saying it too often would make the loss harder to carry. I had not slept at all. Nana's map was folded inside my coat, warm from my body and heavy with what it had shown me in silver bloodlight. When I stepped outside, the world was washed colourless. Mist hung low over the ravine. Darius stood at the tree line with his back to the cabin, one hand braced against a pine trunk, shoulders rigid beneath a damp black shirt. He looked like a man trying not to break where anyone could see it. I was too angry to let him. "You were going to send me away," I said. He didn't turn. "I still am." "No." That got his attention. He looked over his shoulder, eyes shadowed and raw. "Caliana." I crossed the distance between us and shoved the folded map against his chest. "No more half-truths, no more roads, no more deciding for me because you're afraid." He stared at the paper, then at me. You think fear is all this is? I think your father keeps winning because you keep helping him. His jaw flexed. You don't know what he does. Then tell me. The mist shifted around us. Behind us, the cabin remained still, as if even the walls were listening. Darius looked away first. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he laughed once, quietly, without humour. I kissed you, he said, and within hours he was standing at your gate. The words should not have felt like a wound. They did. He came because he wants power, I said. He came because the scar woke. That stopped me. I had known it. Not fully, not with words, but hearing him say it made the truth heavier. Darius dragged a hand down his face. The mark isn't just punishment. It never was. Then what is it? His gaze dropped to the tree roots at our feet, to the dark earth webbed beneath the pine needles. A leash, he said. A blood tether. He carved it into me with his own blood and moon circle ash after I defied him. I thought it was meant to humiliate me, hurt me, maybe track me sometimes. His mouth twisted. It does more than that. He touched the place over his heart, careful now, as if even cloth hurt. When something in me reaches, he said, voice low, it answers him. I frowned. Reaches? Hope, love, loyalty strong enough to make me choose something over his will. He finally met my eyes. The scar burns. He feels it. The cold moved through me. Not a figure of speech, not a father knowing his son too well. A true wound made into a road. That's why you pulled away, I said. He gave the smallest nod. My father has spent my whole life teaching me what hope costs. When I was young, if I got close to someone, they were punished. A friend was beaten. A wolf reassigned to patrols meant to kill. My mother... He stopped, throat working once. Anyone I reached for became something he could bruise. The mist seemed colder. And after he carved the scar, I said, he didn't even have to guess. No. Darius's expression went flat in that way it did when pain was too old for drama. He only had to wait for me to want anything. I thought of him standing outside my room at night, guarding me from a danger already under his skin. Thought of the prayer I had heard through the ward stones. Keep her safe, even if it means far from me. Not distance from indifference. Distance from terror. Still, pity was the last thing he needed from me. So I gave him the truth instead. Your father made exile your punishment, I said. Stop helping him. His whole body went still. I stepped closer. You think starving yourself of every good thing keeps people safe, I said. It doesn't. It just means he chooses the ground every time. He hurts you, and then you finish the work for him. Something fierce flashed across his face. Rafe is dead. Yes. My voice shook, but I didn't lower it. And his last words were not run farther. He flinched. Good. I pulled the map from his hand and opened it against the pine trunk between us. The hidden silver lines shimmered faintly where my blood had woken them. Moon Hollow gleamed at the centre of a web older than his father, older than any pack law twisted to cruelty. What is bound by stolen blood on sacred ground must be broken there also, I read. Darius stared at the words as if they had struck him. Moon Hollow, I said. Not just for the ritual, for him. This is where he rooted himself into the land. This is where he can be torn out. He didn't answer. So I asked the question I should have asked sooner. Why does he hate your happiness like it insults him? A long silence passed before Darius spoke. When I was a boy, during a winter rite at Moon Hollow, the stones answered me. The air seemed to thin. He said it with no pride at all, only weariness. My mother told me later what it meant. Not every alpha line carries the old mark the same way. Some rule because they inherited rank, some because they can force obedience. But there's an older thing, something the land answers, something wolves answer when they choose freely. His mouth tightened. She said the moon had touched me with it. True alpha. The words went through me like a bell. My father heard enough to understand he would never be that, Darius said. So he spent the rest of his life making sure nothing in me could grow strong enough to prove it. Every bond is freely given. Every wolf who chose me. Every... He looked at me then, and the rest of the sentence burned between us. Every love he could scent, he broke. Not because love made Darius weak. Because love made him dangerous to a tyrant. I took another step until there was no room left for distance to lie between us. Then stop letting him decide what you get to love. Darius's breath caught. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then, very slowly, I lifted my hand and laid it over the scar through his shirt. He did not step back. Pain jumped under my palm, hot, sharp, wrong, but beneath it I felt something else. A line pulled taut toward the west, toward stone and moonlight and blood. A tether, yes, but not unbreakable. It shuddered at my touch as if choice itself offended it. Darius closed his eyes. "Everyone I reach for becomes a wound," he said. I kept my hand where it was. "Then stop reaching like you're asking permission," I said softly. "I am here because I choose to be. Your pack stays because they choose to. You don't beat a man like him by fleeing what he stole. You beat him by taking it back." His eyes opened. Something in them had changed. Not healed, not softened, but steadied, like a blade finally lifted instead of left on the ground. After a long moment, he covered my hand with his. "All right," he said. 2 words, but they felt like the earth was shifting. He called everyone into the front room an hour later. The cabin filled fast, Gideon with his shoulder bound, Mara with her silver braid damp from the mist, Thomas pale but upright, Eli grim and hollow-eyed, Nessa with one child on her hip and the other clutching her coat. Even the younger wolves came in and stood along the walls, silent and watchful. Rafe lay at the center of the room beneath his blanket. Darius stood beside him. I took my place at Darius's left, not behind him and not hidden. I felt the weight of every eye that noticed it. Let them. For once, Darius did not speak immediately. He looked at Rafe first, then at the wolves still living. "I was wrong," he said. No one moved. "I thought keeping us moving would keep you alive. I thought if I denied my father ground, he'd have less to take from us." His voice was steady, but grief roughened the edges. "Rafe died because I let fear choose for me again." Gideon bowed his head once. Darius went on. "My father is preparing to bind what remains of our pack at Moon Hollow by blood law. If we keep running, he will finish it. So I am done running." The words landed heavy and clean. "I am going west," he said, "back to our land. I will break him there or die there trying, and I will take Rafe home." A muscle jumped in Eli's jaw. Nessa's little boy tightened his grip on her sleeve. Darius looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. "But hear me clearly. I am not ordering anyone into this. Nana's house remains a sanctuary. Anyone who wants safety, take it. Anyone who wants another road, I won't stop you." He drew one breath. "If you come with me, it will be by choice." Silence followed. Then Gideon stepped forward first. "About damn time," he said roughly. A few strained huffs of breath moved through the room, too sharp to be laughter, too alive not to matter. Mara came next, one brow lifted. "I am old, not dead, and I have no interest in dying in borrowed cabins." Eli stepped up beside them. "My brother refused him." His voice shook once, then steadied. "I'm not kneeling now." Nessa adjusted the child on her hip and moved forward too. "My cubs deserve a home they don't have to whisper in." Tomas pushed himself off the wall with visible effort. "I crossed half his territory to find you," he muttered. "Don't insult me by thinking I came for another escape route." One by one the others followed. Not quickly, not blindly. Each wolf crossed the room in their own time and chose where to stand. By the time the last of them moved, the space beside Darius was no longer empty. It was a line. A pack. Not held there by fear. Held there by decision. Darius looked at them, and I saw it happen. The old grief still there, the guilt still there, but underneath it, something truer rising to meet what had been freely given. Not command. Belonging. He bowed his head once, not as Alpha demanding obedience, but as a man receiving trust he knew the cost of. Then he lifted his gaze west. And this time, when he said, "We go home," no one heard an order. They answered him anyway. We went west with Rafe. No one said much on the drive. Grief had burned the words out of us. The trucks rattled over washed-out roads and old logging cuts, while mist clung low in the hollows and the trees thickened around us. Thomas rode up front now, weak but stubborn, directing Gideon down routes that looked more memory than road. Darius drove the lead truck in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other too often brushing the scar beneath his shirt, as if checking whether it was still there. It was. I could feel it from 3 vehicles back, tight, angry, pulled towards something waiting. But beneath that pull, as we crossed farther into the western ridge country, I felt something else wake under the earth. Not the house line. Not mine. Older, wilder, wolf-made and stone-bound. By the time the convoy stopped, even the children had gone still. A boundary marker leaned from the ground ahead of us, half buried in weeds and mud. Someone had hacked at the old carving with an axe. I could still make out the crescent shape and the wolf's head beneath the damage, though both had been smeared over with old blood, and a blacker symbol I recognized as his father's claim. Darius got out first. The whole pack watched him walk to the stone. He stood over it for a long moment, as if bracing himself against a blow. Then he set his palm on the broken mark. The air changed. The pines shivered, though there was no wind. Something moved under the ground in a slow, deep pulse, like a sleeping heart startled once in its sleep. Darius sucked in a breath. His head snapped up. "What is it?" I asked, already moving toward him. He looked at me almost like he didn't know how to answer. It didn't hurt. The scar. For the first time since I had known him, his father's mark had answered with something other than pain. I knelt beside the boundary stone and pressed my fingers into the damp moss at its base. Power rippled under the soil in fine silver lines, faint, buried, but unmistakable now that I knew what to search for. Nana's maps had not been theory. The pattern beneath this land matched the one beneath the house, beneath the ridge, beneath every old threshold mark I had touched. The truth settled hard and bright in me. The Woods women had never guarded one house. We had guarded hinge points, threshold lands, places where old power was meant to pass cleanly and be held by choice instead of force. This packland was one of them. I looked up at Darius. "I can wake this." Choice, I thought. Always choice. "This land won't take me just because I can touch it," I said quietly. "Not if it's what it should be." Understanding moved through his face, slow, grave, certain. He crouched across from me, his hand still resting on the broken stone. "This is my family's ground," he said. The land answered immediately. Not like Nana's house had, all roots and old hearth magic. This felt broader, harder. Stone ridges, old den mouths, buried bones, moonlight soaked into generations of wolf lore. I gave it my voice anyway, low and steady, the words rising in a language I had not learned so much as remembered. Silver lit the fracture. The boundary stone hummed. Then the pulse ran outward. I felt it race away through root and shale and old buried lines, threading west through the territory, like someone relighting a darkened path. A few wolves behind us gasped softly. Nessa's boy clutched her hand. Gideon swore under his breath. Darius just stared at the stone beneath his hand, his face gone still with something too complicated to name. His gaze sharpened. "What do you need?" Recognition, maybe. Relief. Home. The farther in we drove, the worse it hurt to look. Dens cut into the hillsides had caved in or been burned out. Hunting blinds stood collapsed in the brush. The old marker posts along the pack road were stained brown-black and carved over with his father's brand. Once, we passed a training ring. I only knew for what it was because Thomas pointed at the circle of rotted fence posts and said, voice gone flat, "That used to be full every spring." Used to. The words gathered like ghosts. We buried Rafe on a rise above a dry creek bed where flat stones had been set into the earth in a half-moon. A mourning place, old enough that even I could feel how many wolves had come there grieving. Darius and Gideon carried him up. No one cried loudly. The pack wasn't made that way. But grief sat open in every face as each of us laid a stone over the blanket wrapped around him. Eli placed Rafe's knife there last. Mara set a strip of dark cloth over the hilt. Darius stood at the head of the grave and looked down for a long time before speaking. "He got us here," he said. That was all at first. Then his voice roughened. "He died facing the enemy and protecting his pack. Let the land remember him as he was. Let us do better by his death than we did by his life." No one answered. They didn't need to. The silence was a vow. We had barely finished setting watches when the land tugged at me. I went still. It felt like fear pressed underground, small, clustered, desperate. Not far, north of the rise, beyond a stand of scrub pine and a line of old sheds half swallowed by bramble. "There are people here," I said. Darius was beside me immediately. "Where?" I pointed. Thomas swore. "Storage cellars. They used to keep winter meat there." "Now?" Gideon asked. "Now his father keeps what he doesn't want running loose." Darius didn't hesitate. "Gideon, Eli, with me." His eyes cut to mine. "Caliana." We moved fast through the brush. 2 wolves loyal to his father were posted outside the farthest shed, one smoking, one half asleep against the doorframe. They died before either of them could shout. Darius took one with a knife under the jaw. Gideon broke the other's neck clean and silent. Then we were at the cellar doors. They had been barred from the outside with chain and iron pin. I touched the warped wood and felt panic on the other side so vividly it made my chest ache. "Back up," I whispered. Roots snaked up through the packed dirt and curled around the rusted hinges. Wood groaned. Iron shrieked once. The doors burst inward. The smell hit first. Fear, blood, damp, too many bodies and too little air. Shapes flinched back into the dark until Darius stepped into the opening and said, low and clear, "It's me." No one moved. Then an older woman near the wall made a broken sound and came to her feet too quickly. "Darius!" He went to her at once. I saw the moment recognition struck him. Not as Alpha, as a son of this place. "Marta," he said, and whatever else he might have said vanished when she grabbed his face in both hands like she needed proof. "You lived," she whispered. Behind her, others were rising slowly. A teenage boy with a healing collar wound. 2 men I recognized only from the way Darius's expression changed when he saw them. A young mother clutching a sleeping child so tightly the little girl whimpered. "We're getting you out," Darius said. One of the men looked toward the trees like freedom itself might be a trick. "He said you were dead." Darius's jaw tightened. "He lies." He stepped back then, enough to be seen by all of them. "I won't drag you anywhere," he said. "You're free. If you choose to come with us, come." For one breathless second, nobody moved. Then Marta straightened, wiped her face with the back of her hand and said, "I'm done waiting in holes for monsters to decide my life." She walked out first. The others followed. Word travels strangely on wounded land. Some of it went by whisper, carried from the cellar to old den mouths and ravines where wolves had been hiding. Some of it, I think, travelled through the line I had woken, because by late afternoon I kept feeling eyes from the trees, watching, measuring, hoping. Darius stood on the broken wall of an old watchpost at sunset and gave a call. Not the crushing, dominant force his father used. This was something else. It rolled out over the territory in a deep, carrying note that made the stones under my feet vibrate. Invitation, not demand. Home, if you still want it. For a while, nothing answered. Then a shape stepped from the tree line. An old sentry with one ear torn and his arm in a sling. Then a pair of thin, adolescent wolves in borrowed coats. Then a woman carrying an infant wrapped against her chest. Then 3 more. Not many. Enough. enough to watch Darius go still in the fading light as face after face emerged from the edges of the territory he thought had been emptied of him forever. Some looked ashamed to be alive. Some looked furious. Some looked like they wanted to fall to their knees and did not yet know whether hope could survive standing up. But they came. And when they looked at him, I saw it strike him all over again. Not as a title, not as inheritance, but as something freely placed in his hands. Choice. The thing his father had never understood. We reached the Alpha House after dark. It stood on a rise above the rest of the settlement, larger than the other buildings and far more broken. One half of the porch had collapsed. 2 windows gaped black and empty. The front door hung crooked on one hinge, and the old carved moon over the lintel had been split clean through. Darius stopped at the foot of the steps. He did not say he couldn't go in. He didn't need to. "I'll set guards," he said roughly. "Check the lower buildings." I nodded, but I was only half listening. Something inside the house was pulling at me. Not the father's magic, not the scar. Something hidden, waiting. I stepped through the broken doorway alone. The air inside smelled of dust, old smoke, and rain-soaked wood. Claw marks scored the walls. A portrait frame lay shattered on the floor. The house had been gutted in the way cruel men gut things they cannot fully erase. Still, the threshold remembered. I followed the pull to the old hearth. The stone there had cracked down the middle, but one lower brick was cleaner than the rest, touched less by soot. I crouched and pressed my fingers to it. Hollow. My pulse kicked. I pried it loose. Behind it was a narrow cavity wrapped in oilcloth. I drew the bundle out with shaking hands and unfolded the cloth. A journal lay inside. The leather was worn soft with age. On the first page, in a woman's steady hand, were the words, "If this finds you, my son, then you came home before your father could bury the truth with me." I read the second line before I remembered how to breathe. "If this finds you, my son, then you came home before your father could bury the truth with me." The ruined Alpha House had gone very still around me. Wind moved through the broken window frames. Somewhere outside, a truck door slammed, voices low and tired as the others settled in for the night. But in the old hearth room, kneeling in dust with a dead woman's journal in my hands, it felt like the whole house was holding itself together long enough to make sure this was seen. I heard Darius on the porch before he stepped inside. "Caliana?" His voice was rough with exhaustion. I looked up. He stood in the doorway, broad shoulders filling the frame, moonlight catching on the hard line of his jaw and the strain in his face. He had not really rested since Rafe died. He had only kept moving. "I found something," I said. He crossed to me at once. When I held out the journal, he stopped. Not dramatically, just enough that I knew he recognized the handwriting before he touched it. "My mother's," he said. The words came out almost soundless. He lowered himself beside me on the hearthstone, and for a moment neither of us opened the book again. His thumb rested over the first page, over the curve of ink that had once been guided by her hand. I thought of all the years this had lain hidden inches from fire and ash, while he had lived under the weight of questions no one would answer. Finally, he turned the page. The entries were not orderly. Some were dated. Some weren't. Some had been written carefully, as if she meant them to last. Others cut sharp and quick across the paper, like they had been set down in the little time fear allowed. The first truth hit fast. "Tonight, at Moon Hollow, the stones answered my son." Darius's hand tightened on the journal. I kept reading. He is still young enough to look surprised by his own hands. He touched the center stone, and the circle fell silent. Not from dominance, not from fear, but from recognition. Even the old wolves felt it. The land bent toward him as if it had been waiting. A few lines lower, the handwriting changed. The strokes pressed harder into the page. His father saw it too. Darius looked away first. I turned the page. There, written years earlier in a calmer hand, was another piece of the shape we had only been guessing at. He has always wanted what cannot be forced. Before Darius was born, He went east, seeking the threshold power guarded by the Woods line. He believed ancient gifts could be taken by rank, by threat, by blood. The land refused him. He came back humiliated and has never forgiven refusal. I felt the words like a hand closing around the back of my neck. The Woods line. My line. Not just a coincidence in the story of his father's hunger. Not just timing or fate drifting two worlds together. He had failed to force my family's power long before I was ever born, and now the son he hated had found the one thing he never could, not possession, but invitation. Darius must have felt the shift in me, because his gaze snapped to mine. "He went after your bloodline before?" I asked. His mouth hardened. "I didn't know it was yours. Only that he used to speak about the Eastern Keepers like they'd insulted him by existing." Of course he had. Men like his father never called refusal by its proper name. They called it betrayal. I turned to another page. This time the words were harsher. He watches the pack when they gather to Darius. He punishes small things first. A pup laughed too loudly at one of my son's stories and was put on winter watch. An elder praised Darius's restraint after a hunt and was denied rations for 3 days. He does not fear disobedience most. He fears affection. My throat tightened. Freely given loyalty wakes in Darius what cruelty never could. That is why his father strikes at joy. Each bond reminds the land there is another kind of alpha. Darius made a broken sound under his breath, one I might not have heard if I had not been sitting so close. I looked at him. He was staring at nothing now, not the pages, not the room, but someplace much farther back. "I thought he was teaching me a lesson," he said after a moment. "Every time someone got hurt because of me, I thought that was the lesson. Don't care too much. Don't let anyone stand close." His jaw flexed. I never understood that the closeness itself was what terrified him. I reached for his hand. He let me take it. I turned to the next marked page and saw a dark stain across the edge, like water or blood had once dried there. This entry had been written in a hand that shook. He carved the wolf eye into my son's chest tonight. My breath caught. Darius went utterly still. He called it discipline for mercy. It was not. It was fear wearing a father's face. He has found a way to use blood and circle ash to tether what he cannot own. If the mark burns when hope awakens in Darius, let him know it is not destiny. It is a coward's leash. The room seemed to tilt. So she had known. Not only what the scar was, but why. Not punishment, surveillance. A way for his father to feel every dangerous stirring of hope and stamp it out before it became something stronger. I read the last lines aloud because Darius no longer seemed able to. "If you read this, my son, hear me where he never could. You were not marked by the moon to rule through fear. The true alpha is not the wolf who can make others kneel. He is the one others rise to stand beside." I had to stop there. My vision blurred. Below that, in firmer ink, one final passage had been underlined twice. "If he teaches you that love is a wound, remember this. He only wounds what has power to unmake him. Freely given bond, pack loyalty, a heart chosen without force, these are things he cannot counterfeit. This is why he hates your joy. This is why he hates anyone who chooses you. You are the son he could not own." When I finished, the silence between us felt sacred. Darius sat with the journal open across his knees, his head bowed. I could not tell whether he was breathing until his shoulders rose once, sharply, and settled again. "She knew," he said. The grief in his voice was not just for the truth. It was for the years he had carried its opposite. "Yes," I whispered. "She knew." He laughed once, but there was no humour in it. "And she hid this in his house." "She hid it in your house," I said. That made him look at me. It was a small thing, maybe, a matter of one word, but I saw it land. "He's going to come harder now," Darius said. "If I challenge him with this, if I stand in front of the pack and the land answers—" He stopped. His eyes searched my face as if he was trying to decide how much honesty he could survive from me. "You know what this means." I did. It meant his father had not only feared his power, he had feared exactly what I was to him. A chosen bond, a line of threshold keepers freely standing where he once tried to force entry. It meant, if I stayed, I would not be standing beside danger by accident. I would be standing in deliberate defiance of the one thing his father had built his life on, taking what should only be given. I should have been afraid. I was. But fear and choice were not the same thing. I closed the journal gently and set it aside. Then I turned fully toward him and put my hand over the scar beneath his shirt. Pain flickered under my palm, then steadied. Darius's breath caught, but he did not move away. "I know what loving you costs," I said. His eyes closed for one beat, as if the words had struck him somewhere he had no armor left. I waited until he looked at me again. "I am choosing it anyway." There it was. No pity, no rescue, no soft lie that we would somehow outrun what he was. Just the truth, laid clean between us. Something in his face changed. Not the grief. That remained. Not the fear either. He was too honest for it to vanish because I said something brave. But the loneliness in him shifted. Like a locked room had finally been opened, and air could get in. He lifted his hand and covered mine where it rested over his heart. "I don't know how to do this without breaking things," he said quietly. "Then we do it differently than he taught you." A breath passed between us. Then Darius leaned forward until his forehead touched mine. No urgency, no heat sharpened by danger, just the weight of him, warm and real and here. Outside, the wind moved through the broken porch. Inside, he whispered, "Stay with me tomorrow." I answered without hesitation. Yes. We called the pack together at dawn. Mist lay thick over the ruined yard. The old watchpost above the Alpha House had half collapsed, but its signal stone still stood at the center, streaked with weather and old blood. Wolves gathered in a wide, rough circle around it, Gideon with his injured shoulder strapped. Tight, Mara stern and watchful, Nessa with her cubs close, Thomas pale but standing, the newly freed families from the cellars, the wolves who had come out of hiding at sunset. Darius stepped into the center with his mother's journal in one hand. I took my place beside the signal stone. Murmurs moved through the gathered wolves when they saw the worn leather. A few older faces changed entirely. They remembered it, or maybe they remembered her. Darius waited until the yard went still. "My mother left the truth of this pack in writing," he said. His voice carried clean in the cold air. "My father ruled by fear because it was the only thing the land would answer from him. He kept power through blood and pain and the lie that strength is whatever can be forced." He looked around the circle, meeting every eye. "I am done living inside that lie." No one moved. He lifted the journal slightly. "By old moon law, an alpha who rules through stolen blood may be challenged before witness at Moon Hollow. The land, the pack, and the circle will judge what fear has hidden." Mara's chin lifted once. Gideon muttered something like "finally" under his breath. Gasps broke around the yard as light raced through the cracks in the stone and ran outward beneath the ground, threading through ruined paths and old den roads, reaching for every place the packlands still remembered themselves. The power rose under my voice when I spoke, carrying farther than sound should have. Darius stepped forward. He did not shout. He did not need to. "By blood wrongfully bound and land wrongfully held, I call you to Moon Hollow," he said, not just aloud, but through the circle, through the awakened lines, through every listening stone on pack ground. Answer before witness, answer before the wolves you broke, answer before the land you stole. The scar flared beneath my hand where I still touched the stone. Darius stiffened, but he stayed standing. His next words struck harder. "I challenge you for the pack, for the blood you used, for the fear you named law. Come and be seen." The call left him and went everywhere. I felt it race down ridge and ravine, through hollow trees, over marker stones, into den mouths, through abandoned cabins, through every place fear had crouched and waited. Then, from far across the western dark, a howl answered. Low, furious, certain. Around us, every wolf in the yard lifted their head toward the sound. Beside me, Darius did not flinch. At last, the challenge was no longer hidden inside a scar or a prayer. Now the whole territory would witness who truly belonged. Moon Hollow did not look holy at moonrise. It looked hungry. The old stone circle sat in the centre of the clearing like a mouth held open too long. Dark stains marked the bases of the standing stones. The earth between them had been churned by years of feet, blood, and fear. Above us, the full moon hung white and pitiless over the ridge. I could feel the threshold lines under the ground, awake now because I had woken them, but wrong here, strained, clogged with old hurt, as if the hollow had been forced to swallow more than it was ever meant to hold. Our wolves came in silence. Gideon took the front with the fighters, broad and grim, blood already dry on one sleeve from an earlier skirmish. Mara set the wounded and the younger ones behind the eastern stones, her silver braid wrapped tight and 2 knives at her hips. Thomas stood with the freed prisoners from the cellars, pale but upright. Nessa held her cubs close, though both children were trying hard to look brave. Darius stopped at the edge of the circle. Rafe's knife rode at his back. His scar burned so hot I could feel it from where I stood beside him, like a coal buried under skin. But he did not flinch. The wind moved through his dark hair. Moonlight caught the hard line of his jaw. Then his father stepped out of the western trees. For one strange moment, I saw the resemblance so sharply it made my stomach turn. He had Darius's height, Darius's broad shoulders, even the same shape to the mouth. But where Darius carried restraint, this man wore cruelty like birthright. His wolves spread behind him in a half-circle, armed and watchful. Some looked eager, some looked empty. A few looked like they were already regretting which side of the clearing they had chosen. His father's gaze found me first. "Well," he said, smiling without warmth. The little woodskeeper finally came to the place that matters. A chill moved through me, but I held his stare. The land refused you once, it remembers. Something ugly flashed in his face. Then he looked at Darius. "And still you bring me gifts." Darius stepped forward into the moonlit ring. "I brought witnesses." The smile on his father's mouth thinned. "Before moon, land, and pack," Darius said, voice carrying clean through the hollow. "I challenge the blood you stole." The clearing went still. His father tilted his head. "You challenge me with what? A handful of strays? A dead woman's words? A girl whose power your kind never learned to deserve?" "With choice," Darius said. That landed harder than a shouted threat. I saw it in the old wolves' faces, in the way some of the father-loyal wolves shifted where they stood, in the way the man at the centre of all this finally let the sneer slip and showed his teeth. "Choice," he said softly. "You always were your mother's mistake." Then he cut his palm with one claw and slammed it against the centre stone. The hollow answered wrong. Darkness rippled through the circle lines under the earth. Not natural night, but something sticky and forced. Blood used too many times in the same place until the land could no longer spit it back out clean. Darius's scar tore open. He dropped to one knee with a sound like a punched breath. "No," I started forward, but Gideon caught my arm for one brutal second. "Wait for the break," he growled. His father laughed. "You feel that, son?" he called across the circle. "That is what hope costs." Then he lifted his hand. His wolves charged. Everything shattered at once. Gideon hit the first line like a falling tree, taking 2 wolves down before they could fully shift. Thomas and Eli crashed in after him. Steel flashed. Claws raked bark from the outer stones. Mara planted herself in front of the wounded and younger wolves and drove a knife into the throat of the first man stupid enough to rush her line. I ran for the circle. A body came out of the dark and hit me from the side. Celine. We went down hard in the churned mud between 2 standing stones. Her knife flashed silver in the moonlight, aimed clean for my ribs. I twisted, caught her wrist with both hands, and felt her breath hit my cheek in a hot, vicious laugh. "He still prays for you," she hissed. "Even now." I drove my knee up into her stomach and threw her off. She came back faster than she should have, face slick with fury, hair torn loose. You think choosing him saves you? Everyone he loves ends up bleeding. The words struck too close because they were meant to. She slashed. I jerked back, but not far enough. Fire opened across my forearm. Behind her, in the centre of the ring, Darius's father circled him slowly while Darius fought to stand. Each step the older man took seemed to pull on the black line I could suddenly see running from his blood-smeared palm to the torn scar in Darius's chest. A tether. A leash. Every fear Darius had named was right there in front of me, made visible under the moon. His father spoke low, but the whole hollow heard him. Your mother reached for you. She died. Your wolves reached for you. They broke. The fool in the pines reached for you, dead. His smile widened. Tell me again how love makes you strong. Rafe's last words flashed through me. She was never the weakness. Running was. Take us home, Alpha. Celine lunged again. I put my bleeding hand to the earth and sang. The sound ripped out of me rough and old. Roots answered first, then stone. The ground under Celine's feet split just enough to throw her off balance. She stumbled, cursed, and I sent a thorned vine up through the crack. It wrapped her ankle, yanked hard, and slammed her into the nearest standing stone. She clawed at it. I gave the land more voice. Roots climbed her wrists. Another vine pinned her throat. Her eyes went wide, not with mercy because she had none left to ask for, but with the sudden understanding that the hollow knew the difference between what was chosen and what was forced. I left her there choking on mud and fear, and ran for Darius. His father had him down again. Blood streaked Darius's chest. One hand was braced in the dirt. The other held him up by sheer refusal. His father stood over him, triumphant and terrible. Look at you, he said, brought to heel by the smallest spark of feeling. You were never meant to rule. You were meant to learn. Darius lifted his head. Even bleeding, even shaking, there was murder in his eyes. But the scar dragged at him again, and his body bowed under it. That was when I stepped into the circle. Caliana. Darius's voice broke on my name. His father turned, smile sharpening. Yes, he said softly. Come closer, little keeper. Let him watch what choosing costs you. I walked to the centre stone. Blood dripped from my cut arm and my palm. The old threshold line surged under my feet, waiting. I looked at the wolves around us, all of them, ours, his. The ones too frightened to move, the ones still half bound by fear, the children behind Mara's line, the freed prisoners, the hidden faces at the edge of the trees. Then I put my hand on the stone. I am Caliana Woods, I said, and my voice rang through Moon Hollow like struck iron. Keeper of Threshold Lands. The hollow listened. I was not taken here. I was not traded. I am not tribute, prize, or ransom. His father moved fast, but the roots at the centre caught his boots for one crucial heartbeat. I looked straight at Darius. Before moon, pack, and land, I choose Darius Anderson, freely. I stand with him as equal, and this land will know the difference. I pressed blood into the stone. The world split open. Silver fire shot through the circle lines, not just here, but outward, through the packlands, through the awakened markers, through every threshold I had touched, and farther still. For one impossible instant, I felt Nana's house answer from the east like a second heartbeat, house and hollow, root and stone, two kept places singing to each other across the dark. The black blood threaded through Moon Hollow recoiled. Darius screamed. So did his father. The tether between them flashed into sight, a red-black cord from the centre stone to the scar on Darius's chest, and then it cracked like ice under spring thaw. The sound rang across the clearing. Darius arched, breath punched from him, and the scar split open in a jagged silver line. Then the pain was gone. I felt it leave him. His father staggered back with a howl that was almost human, clutching at his own chest as if something had been ripped out through the bone. All around the hollow, wolves bound to him reeled. Some dropped their weapons, some fell to their knees gasping. A few simply stared at their own hands like they had just woken from a long nightmare. Then the ridges answered. Howls rose from the dark beyond the trees, one, then three, then many. Shapes began to emerge from the woods. More wolves, thin from hiding, scarred, furious, hopeful, the missing, the waiting. Darius got to his feet, not like a man dragging himself up, like something finally unchained. He lifted his head and gave a call. It rolled through Moon Hollow and out over the territory, deep and vast and undeniable. Not a command that crushed, not fear, not force. A call to come home. The wolves pouring from the trees answered it at once. His father saw them and lost what little shape he had left. "No," he snarled, stumbling for a fallen blade. "No, they are mine." He spun, not toward Darius, but toward the edge of the clearing, where the teenage boy from the cellars stood frozen near Mara's line, collar scar pale against his throat. The old alpha lunged. Darius moved faster. He caught his father from behind, drove Rafe's knife clean under his ribs, and ripped him back before the blade could reach the boy. The older man choked once, shock overtaking rage. Darius held him there. For one heartbeat, the whole hollow seemed to stop breathing. Then Darius said, voice low and lethal, "Not one more." He pulled the knife free. His father hit the dirt and did not rise again. Silence fell. Not empty silence. The kind that comes after a storm breaks and everyone is still waiting to learn what survived. Darius stood in the center of Moon Hollow with blood on his hands, his chest heaving, the cracked scar silvered under the moon. No one knelt. They came forward instead. Gideon first, battered and grinning like pain meant nothing. Mara after him, one knife bloody, one still clean. Nessa with her cubs, Thomas, Marta, the freed wolves from the cellars, the hidden wolves from the trees. One by one, they crossed the hollow and stood beside him. I remembered the line from his mother's journal. The true alpha is not the wolf who can make others kneel. He is the one others rise to stand beside. I went to him last only because I was already there. When his hand found mine, it did not feel like victory. It felt like truth. Under one full moon, on land that had finally spat out what was stolen, Darius no longer looked like a hunted son. He looked like home. 3 weeks after Moon Hollow, I woke to hammers. Home, it turned out, did not come back in one victorious night. It returned board by board, breath by breath, wolf by wolf. From the repaired upstairs room of the Alpha House, I could hear the low thud of beams being set into place, Gideon cursing at a stubborn joint, children laughing where children had once learned to stay silent. Morning light spilled through the new window frame Darius had helped fit the day before. The smell of pine shavings and wood smoke drifted in with it. Under the floorboards, the threshold lines ran clean. Not perfect. Not yet. There were still places in the packlands where the earth remembered blood too sharply, where I had to kneel with my palms in the dirt and sing Old Hurt loose from stone. But the land was no longer bracing for the next cruelty. It had stopped flinching. That alone felt like a miracle. When I stepped outside, I found half the yard already working. Gideon and Eli were raising the frame of what had once been the communal hall. Mara stood below with her hands on her hips, issuing orders sharp enough to cut oak. Tomas, still thinner than he ought to have been, sorted salvaged boards into neat stacks beside the porch. Nessa's cubs sat cross-legged on an overturned crate, painting the new pack symbol onto a plank, the old crescent wolf, but now with roots twined beneath it. That part had been their idea. I liked it better than the old carving. Across the yard, Darius had a beam balanced on one shoulder. Sweat darkened the back of his shirt. He had not grown softer in victory. If anything, he looked leaner now, carved down to what was true. When he saw me, his gaze found mine at once. Not guarded anymore, not distant, just steady and warm in a way that still had the power to undo me. He set the beam down and came toward me. "You slept," he said, like he was still half surprised to find that possible. I smiled. "So did you." Barely. That still counts. His mouth twitched. The scar on his chest no longer ruled every movement he made. It had healed into a pale, broken silver line beneath his skin, the old wolf eye mark split through its center where the tether had cracked. Sometimes I caught him touching it, not from pain now, but from disbelief. I understood that too. Some of his father's wolves had fled the night of the challenge and never looked back. Some had stayed, stunned by the breaking of the blood law, unsure what they were without fear telling them where to stand. Darius had given them the same choice he gave everyone. Leave unharmed, or stay under pack law that asked no kneeling and took no blood oath. Gideon had hated it. Mara had watched. Darius had not bent. "If we build this on captivity," he had said, voice carrying across the yard where the stunned survivors stood, "then we learned nothing. A few left at once. Enough stayed to prove not every loyalist had been loyal by heart." On the second day back, an older sentry with a ruined shoulder had tried to kneel when he addressed Darius as Alpha. Darius had caught him by both arms and hauled him upright so fast the whole yard had gone still. "Stand with me," he had said, "or leave me, but we do not kneel for safety here." No one had tried again. By noon the yard was hot with work and full of life. A wagon arrived from the eastern road carrying 2 wolves I didn't know, a woman with a baby tied against her chest, and a man walking with a limp. Dust coated all of them. Fear did too, though it was thinner than it would have been a month ago. "They came through Hocking Hills," Tomas told me as he climbed down from the driver's bench. "Found the house first. Nana's house. It had not closed when we left. Instead, it had become exactly what she must have meant it to be all along. Sanctuary. Every 7 days, a truck went east with blankets, dried food, medicine, and news. Wolves still slipping away from old blood laws found the house in the woods, the warded threshold, the clean line that ran west from there to here. Some stayed, some moved on. All of them were safe before they had to choose anything else. The woman from the wagon looked between Darius and me with the wariness of someone who had survived too much to trust quickly. "We were told there's no forced swearing here," she said. "There isn't," Darius answered. Her mate's eyes went to the north ridge, to one of the old den mouths that had been cleared and repaired. "If we wanted that one," he said slowly, "would the land take us?" Darius looked at me, not assuming, not offering me as part of what he ruled. Just looking. I stepped forward. "If you invite it to know you," I said, "and if you mean to keep peace with what guards it, then yes." The woman shifted the baby higher on her chest. "How do we do that?" Before I could answer, Nessa's oldest girl tugged at my sleeve with paint-streaked fingers. "Keep her," she said solemnly. "Do roots like babies?" I laughed before I could stop myself. The whole little group went still. Then the woman from the wagon smiled for the first time. That was how the name stayed. Not from the ceremony, not from the claim. From use. Keeper. By afternoon, I was at the north marker with the new family and 6 watching wolves. I pressed my palm to the old boundary stone and let the line under it wake in silver threads. The couple spoke their names aloud. The baby slept through all of it. When the light sank into the den ridge and settled there like a promise, the man let out a breath that shook. Behind me, I heard Mara say to someone in her dry, knowing voice, "Home has its alpha again." A pause, and its keeper. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. We had buried Rafe in haste. We honoured him properly in peace. A month after Moon Hollow, when enough of the returned wolves found their way home to stand witness, we climbed the morning rise at sunset. The grave we had made in grief and urgency had been marked now with a carved stone. Eli had cut the letters himself. Rafe. He brought us home. The wind moved through the dry grass around us. The whole pack was there. Those who had fled and returned. Those who had stayed hidden. Those who had stood with us from the beginning. Even the younger wolves were quiet. Darius went first. He laid Rafe's knife at the base of the stone. He had cleaned the blade himself. The metal caught the dying light for one brief moment before he stepped back. "He saw the truth before I did," Darius said. His voice was rough, but it did not break. "She was never the weakness. Running was." His eyes found mine, then moved over the gathered wolves. "He died forcing me to stop helping my father make exile our law. We are standing here because Rafe brought us the courage to come home. So let the land remember him, let us remember him, and let this pack never again call retreat wisdom when fear is the one choosing." One by one, each wolf stepped forward and left a stone. Mara left a strip of dark cloth, same as she had before. Gideon left a whetstone. Nessa's cubs left wildflowers with the stems bent crooked in their fists. When it was my turn, I placed my palm on the marker and let a thread of root wind gently beneath the grave, not to bind him there, but to hold the earth kindly around his rest. This time, grief was not something done between attacks. It had room to stand upright. That night, the Alpha House was quiet in a way that still felt new. One whole wing had been made livable again. Fresh boards shone pale in the lamplight. Darius's mother's journal sat openly on the mantel now, no longer hidden behind brick and ash. Truth belonged above the hearth where everyone could see it. I was standing at the bedroom window in one of Nana's old nightgowns, brought west in the bottom of a cedar chest because I could not quite bear to leave every piece of her behind, when Darius came in. He shut the door softly. "Everyone settled?" I asked. "Tomas took first watch," he said. "Mara threatened Gideon if he tried to work on the roof after dark." "That sounds like Mara." He came to stand behind me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The moon was rising above the ridge, white and calm over land that no longer belonged to a tyrant. "I keep waiting," he said quietly, "for something to tear this apart." I turned to face him. He did not hide from me anymore, but sometimes honesty still looked raw on him, like healing skin. "I know," I said. His hand lifted to my cheek, roughened now by weeks of work instead of battle. "I spent so long praying for you to be safe far from me," he said. "I don't know how to ask for the opposite without feeling selfish." "Then ask anyway." Something in his face softened. "Stay with me," he said, "here. Not because the pack wants it. Not because the land does. Because you do." I answered before the last word had fully left him. "Yes." He kissed me then, slowly, like he was still learning that love could be entered without being stolen. There was no urgency sharpened by fear in it, no desperation, no shadow of pursuit. Only warmth, choice, and the quiet, shaking relief of finally being somewhere no one had to run from. Every time his hands crossed some new small threshold, my shoulder, my waist, the hem of thin cotton, he paused just enough for me to answer him in kind. I did. Gladly, fully. When I touched the scar on his chest, he didn't flinch. Under my palm, it was only skin and a broken silver seam, no leash, no pain, no father waiting at the other end of hope. Outside, wolves walked their chosen watches. Wind touched the new roof, no alarm came, no pounding fists shook the doors, no one interrupted what had been earned between us through blood, grief, and stubborn choosing. Later, wrapped in the hush that follows tenderness, I lay with my head over his heart and listened to it beat. Steady. Free. After a long while, Darius looked toward the moonlit window and said, not silently this time, "Thank you for answering me." My throat tightened. I had heard his hidden prayers in stone and ward and dream. Hearing one spoken aloud felt holier than magic. I kissed the broken scar and whispered, "She did." He smiled against my hair, and for the first time since I had known him, peace did not seem like something borrowed. It felt like hours. By the next full moon, the packyard could barely hold everyone. More wolves had come back from the edges of the territory. Families arrived in trucks, on foot, in borrowed coats, carrying babies, bedrolls, seed packets, old photographs, and the wary hope of people who had spent too long surviving to trust joy immediately. They found repaired dens, cooking fires, laughing children, and no blood on the standing stones. The old brands had been cut off every boundary marker we could reach. In their place, crescent wolves and rooted lines shone fresh in the moonlight. The communal hall stood again. Not finished, but standing. Rafe's memorial stone watched over the rise. The eastern house remained open, its wards linked clean and bright through the threshold network. Refuge in Hocking Hills, home in the west. Two held places answering each other beneath the earth. When the moon rose high, the pack gathered in the yard before the rebuilt hall. No rank lines, no forced kneeling. Just wolves standing shoulder to shoulder beneath one white sky. Darius stepped onto the porch. I stood beside him. Below us were the ones who had left, the ones who had stayed, the ones born into fear and now learning the shape of safety. Gideon, broad and solid near the front. Mara with her sharp eyes catching everything. Thomas, thinner still, but smiling. Nessa's cubs already too wild to stand still through a solemn moment. Wolves I knew. Wolves I was still learning. Wolves who had chosen this place because it was theirs. Because he was theirs. Because it was finally safe to choose. Darius looked over all of them, and I saw the weight of it settle in him. Not like a burden, not like the old chains, but like belonging accepted at last. Then he lifted his face to the moon, and he prayed aloud. For those we lost, he said, his voice carrying clear over the yard. For those who found their way back, for the ones still coming, for the home we will keep. He reached for my hand. I gave it. Then he gave a howl that rolled over the packlands, through the repaired dens, across Moon Hollow, down every reclaimed trail and threshold line. Below us, the wolves answered. The sound rose strong and wild and full, no fear beneath it now, only grief remembered. Joy returned, and the fierce astonishment of a people who had survived long enough to become more than surviving. Under one moon, with home standing around us and the whole pack gathered close, Darius's prayer was no longer silent, and neither was hope.
I see it in your eyes when you look away, like you're carrying storms you won't let me face. You laugh it off, say I'm okay, but your voice don't lie, it's starting to break. And I hate how I stand here playing it cool while every part of me's reaching for you. Don't even know how close I've been to saying your name like it's mine to hold. You sit in silence, drowning slow, and I feel every crack you don't let show. If I could take it, I swear I would trade your pain for mine if I only could. But I bite my tongue, yeah, I hold my place, afraid one move might push you away. So I stay right here in the in-between, loving you loud in a world unseen. When you're hurting, I'm hurting too. Every tear feels like it's mine from you, but I can't reach out, can't cross that line. So I love you quiet every damn time. And I hate this space that I can't undo, being so close but not close to you. If you ever fall, just know the truth. When you're hurting, I'm breaking too.